Hi, I want to take probably be 15, 20 minutes here, talk about Christianity and states in Northeast Africa. Before we do that, though, I want to show you this because this is something which is going to be important for the next few weeks. We've already started talking about state formation in Africa. We talked about that in Egypt or along the Nile, certainly in ancient or pharaonic Egypt, and also in Nubia. And the question is, well, as it usually is for historians, why? Why do these things happen in the time and place that they do? When we're looking at the issue of states forming, kingdoms, empires, whatever it might be, generally scholars look at a list of different factors that might lead to a kingdom or an empire forming at that time and place. And this is that short, simplistic form of that list, starting with the idea of location, including climate and ecological zone, trade routes and partners, enemies, and so on. What type of political organization they have. Once again, ancient Egypt, we had the pharaohs and the ruling family and so on, monarchy. Economy, that's always important. Subsistence strategy, resources, and so on. You have to have some way of feeding your people. Spiritual beliefs. This is one of the ones we're going to talk about today. We'll actually touch on a number of these, but spiritual beliefs are going to be very important. As they were once again in ancient Egypt, right? The pharaohs were seen as living gods, and that's a pretty good way to get the people in your society to follow you. Anyway, and there'll also be military and defense, and then social organization. What kind of groups do you bring together? Is there a hierarchy? Do they have rights and responsibilities? This is kind of what I was talking about with ancient Egypt once again, with the whole patron-client relationship. All right, so I would recommend that you keep this list of things handy, because as we look at societies for the next few weeks, we're going to go down this list and talk about these different factors, and as a easy way of analyzing what's going on. Okay, but as we're looking at today, well, twofold. We're looking at states in Northeast Africa, but we're also looking at the rise of Christianity and how it was used specifically in some of these states as a way to rule and to bring the state together. So first off, let's talk about location. Where are we looking at? Well, I say Northeast Africa. We've already looked along the Nile here, okay, in Nile states. So we're looking down over here, okay, from Meroe over to the Red Sea, and Adelus and Aksum over here. So basically in the northeast along the Red Sea, but that also means along, you see these dotted lines here, these are all trade routes. And as I mentioned with ancient Egypt, when you have trade, you have not just items passing back and forth, but you also have people. And with those people, they bring with them ideas. Well, they sometimes bring other things too, plagues and so on. But in this case, an idea, and one idea that's going to be brought to this area from outside is Christianity, right? And that's going to be quite important. But you see from Egypt here that are referred to as a crossroads in the ancient world. So too, this whole area of Northeast Africa is linked into the Red Sea, over to Arabia, and even up to the Mediterranean. Okay? So these people are plugged into a large part of the world at their time. Okay? So what is the regional context here? I should probably flip these around. One I just mentioned is regional trade networks linking the Mediterranean, Red Sea, Indian Ocean, and surrounding territories. Okay, so everybody's kind of plugged in with one another. And the other regional context is the development of world religions. We're going to see Christianity, and then after that, in the mid-7th century, Islam. And that's once we go back to the map here, and you see the area we're talking about. That's not far away. Jerusalem is here, and we're going to see Judaism first, and then Christianity developing right here, and then Islam developing about right in here. So as you imagine, all these things are going to be transported through this region and affecting the people who live there. All right. Starting once again with Christianity. And your textbook has a pretty good section on Christianity in North Africa at this time. And what you see here is this, as Christianity spreads from, well, what we think of as the Middle East, the Eastern Mediterranean, it spreads around the Mediterranean, on the northern part to Europe, certainly, but in the south to Africa. And a point that your textbook makes that I think should be a little stronger, and so I'm going to make it again here, and that is, it's not just that Christianity is important to Africa, which it was and is, but Africa was very important to Christianity. African communities, especially those in Egypt and especially the city of Alexandria, you see right here, were key to the early survival and spread of the Christian church. Yes, you had the spread into Europe, and people think about Christianity as a European religion nowadays. But remember, it wasn't really welcomed in Europe at that time. Right? It was welcomed by Africans. And Africans are going to be some of the first Christian communities and some of the first major states which are going to become Christian states. So as I said, yes, Christianity is important to Africa, but Africa was important to Christianity as well. Right? So one of the places that Christianity is going to become most important, I guess, is in Ethiopia. Whereas Christianity at this time will spread to other places, including, we'll talk about Nubia a little bit, it won't survive there. You'll have states in Nubia which are Christian states that will survive for hundreds of years. I mean, historically speaking, that's not a small thing. 700-800 years is a pretty good run, right? But once you have the introduction of Christianity in Ethiopia, it continues on until the present day. And it's a particular type of Christianity. And it's a Christianity which is referred to as Monophysite Christianity. Monophysite being a Greek word, being one nature. Because unlike European Christians who believe, for example, that Jesus had this dual nature of fully human and fully God, the Monophysite Christians say, no, there's no humanity there, it's just God. So just a divine presence. Just one of the, many sort of differences you get among Christian groups around the world, right? Anyway, but these Ethiopian Christians are going to have the headquarters of their church actually in Alexandria, Egypt. And Alexandria, Egypt will be the headquarters for most what are referred to as Coptic Christians in the whole area of Northeast Africa. All right, so we're looking at a succession of states in Ethiopia, starting with the state of Aksum. Now, it's going to be founded about 100 AD and will last till about 800 AD, although for the first couple hundred years, it was not a Christian state. It will be converted in the mid-4th century, so that's about 350 AD. Then with the rise of Islam, they're going to be threatened by Muslim power in the Red Sea, and they're going to move away from that position along the Red Sea and into the interior, and that's the second one you see there. Well, they'll live for another 150 years or so. Then they're going to be succeeded by the Zagwe dynasty, and that will be succeeded by the Salamanid dynasty. Salamanid as in King Solomon. And these latter two are also very much Christian states. All right, so from about 350 AD onward, Ethiopia, and certainly the interior of Ethiopia, is going to be ruled by Christian states. How do we know that? Well, we know that because, of course, we have sources, right? One of which is the primary source you have this week, the story of King Ezana. Okay? And King Ezana was king of Aksum. that you see right here in purple on this map. And Aksum's position was very important with its port city of Adelus here because it tapped into these trade routes. Right? And as ones I showed you before, but now we have them in red, so they're easier to follow here. Right there along the Red Sea, water being a great way to transport things, takes people all the way up to Egypt, into the Indian Ocean, to India, down the African coast, across, of course, very close here, across to Arabia, and so on. And then, yes, in the other way too, into the African interior and through Meroe and the Nubian states here. So Aksum is going to be somewhat like Egypt. It's going to be a place of a crossroads where trade routes from the interior come to the Red Sea, the Arabian Peninsula, the Indian Ocean, and the Red Sea across this way. So they're going to be able to take advantage of that location to conduct trade, which is going to lead to wealth, which then also helps the founding of the kingdom. All right. Now, Aksum is going to be a place which also is similar to Egypt in one way, and that is building monumental architecture. In particular, architecture in stone, which we don't have through a lot of places in Africa. One of the things that Aksum is going to be noted for is what are known as stelae. These are these kind of long tower like monuments. They look like some of them roughly shaped like tombstones here, built in the highlands of what is today Ethiopia. And you can see by scale, you see these two guys standing here, right? So that's about 6 feet tall. So this is what, about 80 feet tall of carved stone, which was carved and then erected into position here. Sometime, well, probably what was it, 800 AD. So I don't do math well. 1,500 years ago. Okay, so it's doing pretty well. So they have that sort of monument as well. Now, the other thing we have as far as sources for the past here is coinage, and it's interesting to analyze these for what they tell us about changes in the society. All right, coins are a very important way that kingdoms and kings in particular would try to project their authority, or basically, show their power. If you put your face on a coin, especially a gold coin, right? It means you're important. Okay? And so what we have here is a picture on this coin of King Ezana. Okay? And what's interesting was a couple things that are interesting about this. Okay, so he's got a crown on here. He's got his scepter. Okay, he's flanked by 2 ears of wheat. Okay, and that's important. It shows agricultural abundance, right? Okay, and then there's a crescent up here, possibly indicative of the moon, and a pellet up here, and it says here, Ezana. It says King Ezana, Ezana the king, but it says it in Greek. Why would it do that? Well, because from the late centuries BC to the early centuries AD, Greek was the language of the Eastern Mediterranean and the Red Sea area that people used for trade. When you're conducting trade with somebody else and you don't speak each other's language, you would use Greek. Okay? So the point of creating these coins with the inscription in Greek, obviously, because Greek is not a language of Aksum, but it's to send a message to people outside of the territory. People who are going to get these coins are going to be merchants in other places, maybe in Arabia, maybe in Egypt, okay? Maybe up in the Eastern Mediterranean. And they're going to be able to read that. And they're going to say, oh, King Ezana. Well, you know what? He's obviously, large and in charge here, right? He's got the crown, got the wheat, his scepter, and of course, gold coin, right? That always sends a message. So this is really intended to show his power and his authority. Well, what's interesting then, to me anyway, is the next one. Okay? Because this is one of his successors, Nezuel. So this is about 420 AD, so it's less than 100 years later. Once again, also king of Aksum, that state in Northeast Africa here. But there's differences. Once again, we still have a picture of the king. He's got the crown. He's got a scepter here he's holding. You've got the wheat ears here. But there's some changes. First off is the inscription. Okay? By this cross he will conquer. Well, the inscription itself is in Ge'ez, which is a local language. So, you can take this coin up to the Eastern Mediterranean and Egypt, but it's not going to have the same impact because people there don't speak Ge'ez. So this is clearly intended for people in his area, right? This is to impress people in his own kingdom. And by this cross he will conquer. What cross is that? Well, that's this cross right here. Whereas in the previous coin we had a crescent, a somewhat common symbol, sun, moon, that sort of thing, that you get in ancient inscriptions and monuments. But this is a cross. And what kind of cross is it? Well, it's the cross of Christianity, right? Yeah, it's saying he's a Christian king, he's ruling a Christian kingdom, and this cross, by this cross he will conquer, says this cross is the source of his power, right? So he's saying Christianity is what gives him the power to rule and to conquer his enemies. So by this time then, once again, Christianity is introduced during the reign of King Ezana here, somewhere around 350 AD. But by this period, 70 years later, Aksum is clearly a Christian state. Right? And Nezuel and the subsequent kings are going to use Christianity as a way to bind the people together, as a common spiritual basis for this kingdom. Right? And we can see that then once again in this coin. Now, let me go back to the list quickly here. Where's my list? There's my list. So we're going to have Aksum then rising about 100 AD, about 350 AD becomes Christian. It's going to continue on until about 800 AD. But we see the rise of Islam in about 632 AD, and it spreads quickly around the region. Okay? Because you're going to have, I think we have Mecca on here. Yeah, holy city of Mecca here. We have the rise of Islam, and Islam will spread, of course, on the Arabian Peninsula, but down the Red Sea, Indian Ocean, and in Egypt. Okay? So Aksum is basically, as a Christian state, is going to be surrounded on at least three sides here by Muslims. Okay? And they're going to lose their trade connections. So what are they going to do? They're going to move into the interior. And so they're going to lose that coastal strip there, where once again that port city of Andalus is, and the Aksumite rulers and their successors, Zagwe and Salaminids, will be ruling the interior of what is today Ethiopia. Right? And we're going to rule there until 1974. So once again, that's a pretty good run, right? Okay. Almost 1,000 years. But the Zagwe dynasty then, as they become established, are also going to be a Christian state. And they're also going to use monumental architecture as a way of expressing their power. But what they're going to do is build churches. They're going to build a series of churches like the one you see here, which are really incredible because they're carved out of solid rock. The top of the church here is actually at ground level. Okay? And what they did then, instead of building like a European cathedral where you build up, is they dug down and they carved out around it, created this solid block of stone Then they went inside it and hollowed it out. Okay? And carved out, you see down here, that's a doorway. And then this is about, 3 stories high or so. You can once again see scale because of the people standing over here. Carved the top of the church. It's in it's what it's called a cruciform, or the shape of a cross. Okay? And then created a building out of it. And then surrounding buildings hollowed out in these in the stone around it. You can see a window right there and so on. Anyway, I'll give you a link here in just a minute to to a short video that shows these churches and just how incredible they are. But this is another monumental building project then, which I think is important to demonstrate the factor of Christianity for these states in Ethiopia. All right. Okay. And something your textbook mentioned, I just wanted to show you. This is what's known as the Coptic cross. Right? So it's a crucifix because it's Christian, of course, but it has a slightly different shape, and that's this circle at the top here. There's speculation, and it might be derived from the Ankh. And the Ankh was the ancient Egyptian symbol of eternal life. And it looked like this. Obviously, pretty close, right? And you can see here's an Ankh in a tomb painting. And the idea is that in the afterlife, that was the way to transmit life after death to someone. Well, which of course is what the message of Christianity is, right? It provides life after death. So there may be some connection there. Okay, now Aksum and the Ethiopians are not the only states in this region to become Christian. You also have a series of states in Nubia. Now, the reading you have from Ezana talks about his conquest of Merowe, once again by 320, 350 AD. Did he actually conquer Merowe? Maybe not. It seems like it was probably mostly abandoned. But in either case, you are going to have some successor states to those Nubian states developing at Nobadia, Makuria, and Alodia along the Nile in Nubia. Once again, Nubia is the region of the Nile south of Egypt. Right? And these will also become Christian states. Nobadia is going to be converted to Monophysite Christianity. That's that Christian church headquartered in Alexandria, Egypt. Makuria, though, will be a slightly different type of Christianity because they're going to be converted by Roman Catholic missionaries. So it's going to be a Christianity much more similar to European Christianity. And then the third, Alodia, once again, is a Monophysite conversion from Philae, which is in Egypt. And looking at a map, just so you can see where these are, they should be from the north to the south: Nobadia, Makuria, Alodia. I think my map has slightly different names. Yeah, Nobatia, Makuria, Alodia. There we go. So these two up here in the area known as Kush. Nobatia taking over the area that had been Kerma. Makuria taking over the area that had been Napata. And Alodia taking over this region right here, which had been Merowe. And they are going to be, once again, also Christian states. And although they, like Aksum, are going to be surrounded by Muslims, they're going to continue to have their independence as a Christian state for 800 or 900 years. Right? And then they will eventually be conquered by Muslims. But once again, 800-900 years, a pretty good run. Now, unfortunately, because of their isolation, that they were surrounded by Muslim societies and so on, we don't know that much about them. There wasn't connection between them and the outside world during this period. So most of what we know comes from archaeology. There was an incredible church at Faras up here, as you see in Nobatia, with some really incredible paintings. Here's some frescoes you can see, some religious artwork from that church, which the church itself was been destroyed, but the artwork has survived in the museum in Khartoum, Sudan. You see Saint Anne there, and you see probably an angel here. It's hard to tell. You have the wings, of course, but you also have a crown. So I'm not sure who that is. Stretching forth a staff here. So it could be a saint or it could be an angel. I'm not sure. Anyway, either way, the fact is that here's the Holy Family here, and interestingly, of course, looking rather North African, as you might imagine. But so once again, an example of how archaeology tells us, something that we wouldn't necessarily know about otherwise. Okay, so I've got two links in here to two videos. There's about 9.5 minutes BBC African history on Axum. If you want to watch that, I recommend minutes 3 to 8, and then from 32 on. The stuff in between is mostly contemporary things, which is fine to watch. It's just not really on the focus of what we're doing here. But also, I would give a quick look to this video here called "The Rock-Hewn Churches of Lalibela," and there's no dialogue in this video. It's just plays Ethiopian music and then shows you some pretty incredible shots of these churches, just so you can get a sense of what they were like. Just even a couple of minutes of watching that will give you a good sense of what it was like, I think. Okay, thank you very much.